Bang. All right. We're live on YouTube. YouTube, what's going on? Live on TikTok as well. Figured I'd switch up the format today. As you guys know, going live every single Tuesday and Thursday at noon. I'll have to switch that up during football season because Thursday at noon, I'm usually sitting on a flight going West Coast to East Coast. But switch up the format today. I'm working on a YouTube video, and I thought I would use the live to test out just riffing on the subject, and then I'll make a long form YouTube video on the exact subject. But what the quarterback competition is actually like, for better or for worse, I have tons of experience with that. Been in 4 different quarterback battles in 3 weeks. That's about all we're going to be talking about in the NFL world. I feel like the Giants quarterback battle, the Browns quarterback battle, Ohio State, Alabama, Michigan, like that's going to be the talking point. And for me, every single guy that I was in a quarterback competition with ended up becoming an NFL starter, which is kind of wild. Super wild. We had Cody Kessler, Sam Darnold, Ben DiNucci, technically Kenny Pickett. He's also in there. Max Whittick, I guess, is the one like little asterisk there. Love me some Max Whittick. But anyways, had different. Every single quarterback battle is different, whether it's age, whether it's how close the battle actually is. Sometimes they'll say it's a quarterback competition, but really it's not, and everyone in the locker room knows it. And how have the optics changed over the years, given that the transfer portal and college football and all that. So that's how I'll intro it. But I'll start with ways in which a quarterback competition is similar to other positions. And my first reaction was like, yo, it is not. That's just the reality of the situation. But I think the one area that it is similar is the way that coaches track it. So whether you're in the NFL or college, if you're in a quarterback battle, the way it's tracked is the same as an offensive line or running back, in that every single snap, you're getting a grade. You have a certain rating after that. And in my experience, coaches aren't actually going to make a decision on these stats, but the stats almost give them a way out, or at least proof of concept or backing, that when they have to let the guy know that, hey, you're not the starter, you can look at the stats and be like, this is the reason why. And then coincidentally enough, because I've seen or I've heard of battles where, like, let's say the one quarterback has a grade of 86.2, and then the other quarterback has a grade of like 85.2. Well, 86.2 doesn't necessarily mean that guy's going to get the job. One little point here or there, not necessarily going to be the deciding factor. So in that scenario, the coach might, just conveniently decide to throw that out. So that's where it's the same. Travis, what's going on? Good to see you again. Ways where it is unlike competing for other jobs. We're talking quarterback competitions here, and what it's really like behind the scenes. I would say the intensity, the stakes, and the scrutiny are unlike any other position. I think it's so easy to, from an outsider's perspective, be like, this is actually a pet peeve of mine when fans go down this way of, you'll oftentimes hear like a defensive lineman or like a receiver who becomes a media personality, and they're like, you just got to be straight up. You just got to let the quarterbacks know where they're standing. You got to be truthful, the whole deal. Well, that speaks to a guy who hasn't been either in the head coaching saddle or the quarterback coaching saddle, because the ripple effects of that decision impact the entire identity of your team. That's just the reality of the situation. So the intensity is different. The scrutiny from the media is different, right? I mean, I remember being in literally my first quarterback competition at USC. I would go to the ice bath and like check at what the writers were saying, which is a terrible habit. And I should not have done that. But they were writing stuff and they wanted to know what was going on, who was winning the quarterback competitions, that all the different nuances there. And then nowadays, only one guy starts as a quarterback. So, if you're battling for the left tackle job, well, the loser of the left tackle job is oftentimes going to be the right tackle. If you're battling for the right tackle job, well, if you can still play, you might still be playing guard. If you're a quarterback and you lose, more often than not, you're literally not playing. And then nowadays you're having to transfer. So that's one thing that fans and even media members get looped up into, is you forget that, for a fan, it's just, it's another quarterback. It's another year, another USC quarterback battle. But for that kid, that's oftentimes an entire lifetime's work of coming to a head in one moment where if they lose and they have to transfer and move away from their family or move away from their girlfriend or have to start over in their degree, like the stakes are unlike any other position. Another factor that people sleep on too is play calling matters when you're in a quarterback competition, which is not talked about often enough. And here's what I mean. It matters for quarterbacks and it matters for skill players, but it doesn't matter for an offensive lineman, because that whether it's a smash concept or a four verts concept or a drive concept doesn't really matter for battle when you're battling for the left guard. But if you are, and sure offenses are offensive schemes are different, but if you're a quarterback, if one quarterback gets two deep post shots and they both convert for touchdowns, and the other quarterback gets those same play calls, but the defense gives you a different coverage and that quarterback's forced to check the ball down, well, the quarterback coach might notice that, but the overall vibe of the team, they saw one quarterback get two deep shots for touchdowns and the other quarterback just had two nice checkdowns. The optics of those and the momentum that can build in a quarterback competition, depending on the play calling, matters and makes it completely different from any other starting job. And then the leadership component as well. That's another one is, sure, being a leader as a left tackle matters. Being a voice in the secondary matters if you're battling for a corner spot. But at the end of the day, you can still get away, that's a little bit of a bar, with a more reserved corner, like literally more introverted corner rather than extrovert. Doesn't really matter all that much. It's who can cover the guy. Versus quarterback, that does matter, right? The guy who's maybe more shy, all else being equal, will lose the job to the guy that's a better vocal leader and is more ingrained in the program. And it's funny for any of the like USC fans in here, I do think that was a factor why I won the job versus Sam Darnold back in the day, because I think the coaches knew how ingrained I was in the program and knew that I was one of the vocal leaders of that team. And so, if I was a more shy, more reserved, not a vocal leader, I think going with the younger Sam Darnold week one would have been a lot easier. And so it was much harder to not give me the starting job. Even if, let's say, the on-field stuff was similar, I do think that was a factor. Again, every quarterback competition is different. When I was observing, because I was the third guy of like the Cody Kessler, Max Wittek job, both those guys had a very equal standing within the locker room. So then that leadership component was minimized in that regard. Siobhan, good to see you. Let's see. Speedy Cheetah, Lord Jimbo, how we living? Talking about quarterback competition, what makes it different, and then I'll get into your guys' question here shortly. The numbers today are pretty solid over there on TikTok. The bad approaches that I've seen to quarterback competitions, bad approaches. This can be from the players and the quarterbacks themselves, but also the coaches. I think the coaches that analyze the stats or like leaned so much on stats of like what you did in the previous practice is not positive. I think it establishes a temperament for quarterbacks where you're playing to have good stats rather than playing the quarterback position the way it should. What does that mean? That means that, hey, there's times where you should take the shot and you should go downtown, go up top, and you should, it's 1st and 10. You got a Marquise Lee running equal, you should take that shot. But when you're so focused on stats and performance and completion percentage and checking the box, you can get to a point as a quarterback where it's like, hey, I don't want to make a mistake, so you check the ball down. And that's not helping either quarterback grow when you're playing almost not to mess up or playing to have the cleanest stats. Cleanest stats meaning completion percentage and not throwing picks. But that's not real life. That's not that's not what playing quarterback actually means. The bad approaches I've seen coaches wise, and this is luckily no longer a thing, but when coaches say, hey, there's a quarterback competition, but then don't treat it as an actual quarterback competition. When I was in a quarterback competition with Cody Kessler the second time, he was the returning starter. It was not a true quarterback competition. At the time, I was like hoping it was, but it was not. And I got wind that, him and Sark were like watching film on the side without me. That's okay. If he's your starter, then say he's the starter. But I think that lack of transparency or lack of directness, it to me is just not the best approach, because it made it unnecessarily frustrated, and it just didn't feel truthful, which was annoying. And not that I'm owed anything per se, but it's just on one side you're saying competition, competition, but then behind the scenes you're not treating it that way. Luckily, I don't think that flies anymore because of the transfer portal. I think coaches are forced to be transparent, but that to me is not a good approach. Another bad approach, and this one's funny, is so in my and it worked in my favor and against my favor as well, or worked against me as well. When I battled with Sam Darnold in 2016, I'll never forget. I won the job, and then Clay Helton, before the first game, looked at me and was like, "Hey, I see 4 touchdowns right there," meaning like first game versus Alabama. Joke's on me. But then he also looked right in front of me of like, "Hey, look at Sam. I see 2 touchdowns right there." That to me was really weird and not the best approach. You just gave me the starting nod, yet you're telling the backup that he's going to throw touchdowns versus the number 1 team in the country. Subtle point, but just a weird way of handling that dynamic. You should go all in on your starter. And then even off the side, if you want to tell Sam that to like boost his ego, sure, that's great. But that to me is just like a weird stance to take when you're trying to instill confidence in your starting quarterback. The flip side also worked to my benefit. When I went to Pitt, they made it a point. We had assigned seats in the meeting rooms, and everyone knew that the like starting quarterback sat front row, dead center. And they gave me, the transfer guy that was the new guy, like that seat. I think Ben DiNucci had every reason to be like upset with that. And that's the negatives of having like assigned seats when you're in team meeting rooms, of like, you can say quarterback competition, but then subtly people know, hey, who's sitting in what seat. And that's just, to me, my point there is it's an unnecessary way that it's an unnecessary measure that can piss off the other quarterbacks in the room, to me, in an unnecessary manner, if that makes sense. And there was another point I had there. Oh, in terms of like bad approaches, this isn't necessarily bad or good, but again, I had 4 quarterback competitions. The quarterback competitions with Kessler and DiNucci were much more intense. And I don't blame those guys. I think all 3 of us were wired in a way of like, no, that dude's trying to take food off of my plate. So it was much more intense in those in those dynamics, versus the better approaches. For whatever reason, that energy wasn't the case with Sam Darnold and I. It was, hey, best man's going to play. We all know the deal. I think age helped in that. Like, well, I guess I was the same age differences between me and Cody. But for whatever reason, that temperament and that dynamic of that quarterback room was much lighter. Same way with Max Whittick, same way with Kenny Pickett. It was just lighter. The energy was lighter in the room, which I think allowed everyone to play better football. Actually, I won't go that far, but I think that energy had a ripple effect into the locker room as well, when you can tell, hey, guys are intense. And again, I don't judge the battles with Ben DiNucci or Kenny or Cody Kessler at all, because I was that same way. I was very much like, he's taking food off my plate. But in hindsight, that energy in the quarterback room is probably not the best when it is crazy intense. And as a coach, I think it's your job to get everyone on the same raft, so to speak. Best approaches I've seen with quarterback competitions. I saw the clip last night of Bill O'Brien taking in Ryan Mallett and Brian Hoyer into the room at the same time and delivering them both the same message at the exact time. To me, that instills transparency. To me, that instills respect from a player to a coach, because even if you're not getting the news that you want, you can respect the fact that, like, yo, that coach brought me in at the same time and delivered the same message to both of us. That's what Helton did with Darnold and I after spring. So I was critical of Helton in how he handled the August one. but I think he handled the post spring of that year in a great way. He sat Sam and I down at the same exact time and gave us the same message. Hey, if we had a game tomorrow, Brownie, you would start. But I think I have 2 future NFL starters. So we're going to bring this competition into the fall. It was direct, it was straight up, and it was to both guys at the exact same time, which I admire that approach. And I think Bill O'Brien did the exact same thing. I also think when coaches acknowledge the elephant in the room of, hey, we have a quarterback competition and this is a big deal and the media is all talking about it, that to me, again, establishes transparency and respect, and you're treating your players like adults versus when coaches get mad at reporters for talking about a quarterback competition and acting like it's not that big of a deal when everyone knows it's a big deal. To me, that's a little bit phony and unnecessarily evasive. And I don't think that's the best approach because, again, I don't think it establishes a culture of transparency, in my opinion there. Splitting hairs, but in my opinion there. And last little point, or I guess two more points there. How are quarterback competitions different now than, say, when I was playing 10 years ago? Well, the transfer portal's changed everything. I've said this for years. Coaches used to be able to hide behind the word competition. They used to sit in there and say, hey, we're having a quarterback competition and the best guy's going to play. And then if you balked at that as a player, it was like, oh, well, then are you scared of competition? And luckily the portals got us out of that mentality where, hey, coaches, you no longer can hide behind that word. You have to be direct with your players or else guys are going to transfer and find a new home elsewhere. The connotation of what it means to be a transfer 15 years ago, that was viewed as negative. That was viewed as, hey, you didn't have the guts to stick it out or something must have been wrong with you. Nowadays, it's just the norm. And I think it's allowed coaches, from my understanding, communicate with players in a more adult manner, which I feel like is a positive. The downside of it, though, is players are always looking to jump ship right away. And you can go to a school for one season, quarterback competition, it doesn't work out for you, you jump ship to the next school, and that might not have been the best decision for you personally. For me, I lost a quarterback competition as a true freshman. I was not ready to play big-time college football as a true freshman, whether it was at USC, whether it was at Washington State, whether it was at Oregon State, whether it was at Wyoming. I needed to sit and get used to college football for a year. In this new era of college football, I wonder if I would have been forced or felt the need to transfer right away, which probably wouldn't have helped my college career. It's changed now where it used to be commonplace for college teams to name a starter after spring ball. The reason you do that is so the team kind of knew the leader going into summer. You were all marching in one direction, and it didn't happen all the time, but that was a common element to have. After 15 practices, you name the starter and let's roll with our guy. Now, coaches have zero incentive to name a starter in college football after spring ball because of exactly what I said. If you name a starter, that guy can dip right away, find a new home, and you're behind the 8 ball with having to find a new backup quarterback, and there's just zero incentive. There used to be a game. It started to become less common to name starters after spring on the back end of my college career, like 2016, 2017. Now there is no incentive for college coaches to name a college quarterback after spring ball. In the NFL, that changes where reps are so slim. The earlier you name a starter, whether internally to your team or externally to the media, then you can focus your reps on getting one guy better. That's what's intriguing to me about the Browns quarterback competition and the Giants quarterback competition is you can't entertain 4 guys getting reps in the NFL. You just can't do it. So they got to make a decision really early on of what their game plan is. I'll get into that. I'm going to talk about my top 5 most intriguing quarterback competitions looking ahead to August. But the Giants, there's too many personalities and too many what's the word here? Too many development paths going in different directions that you just can't get away with it. So that's what's changed. And then I also think a factor that doesn't get a lot of street cred, but 15 years ago in college football, the older guy had a immense leg up in a lot of the pro style schemes because pro style schemes were so much more complex to learn. So, for example, you're walking into a USC Lane Kiffin pro style offense. It's going to take a whole off season for a young guy just to get used to getting in and out of the huddle, the terminology, and just getting to a point where you can play. Nowadays in football, the schemes are much, much, much more simplified, where that leg up that the older quarterback had, sure, they still have a leg up in terms of experience, but in terms of literally just logistics of playing the quarterback position, that advantage for an older quarterback has lessened, which has helped younger quarterbacks catch up in quarterback competitions quicker. Don't always hear about that, but that's a big factor. Like 15 years ago, if you asked a true freshman to walk into a pro style offense, they might be good. They might know the reads. They might understand what you're trying to do, but they literally can't get out of their own head in terms of breaking the play in the huddle. So, not an insignificant factor. I'll stop there. Let's other factor I already covered. Quarterback competitions I'm looking forward to in this August, and then I'll get into your guys' questions. I can see YouTube rock and roll and TikTok. Appreciate you guys hanging out. All the likes. It means this shit's pre-recorded. The notes are pre-typed out, Brian. But hey, we're switching up the YouTube live this format. Back half hour, we'll get into your questions. But top quarterback competition battles I'm looking forward to this fall. I got 4, and then a 5th is in the NFL. Number 1, Alabama. I think people are sleeping on the Crimson Tide. We're sleeping on the fact that a year ago, Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb. I know Ryan Grubb was in Seattle, but like they were 2 of the hottest names in football. Their quarterback competition is a big deal because everyone's forgetting about them in the SEC. Is it Austin Mack, the Washington transfer, Ty Simpson? We shall see. But the Bama quarterback competition is a big one because it could dictate whether Alabama's a top tier SEC team or just a team that goes like 7-5, 8-4, and then Kalen DeBoer is potentially on the hot seat a year from now. So that'll be interesting. 2, Michigan. Everyone assumes that it's going to be Bryce Underwood as the starter. Dude, being a true freshman starting quarterback in the Big Ten is no cakewalk. He's battling against a guy who comes in with a bunch of experience in Keene from Fresno State. Is Keene, or I don't know if it's even Keeney. I actually haven't really watched his film, but I need to get to that. But anytime a quarterback has more experience, he's going to have the leg up. If Bryce doesn't play right away, the pressure and the scrutiny, if Michigan does not win right away, will get cranked up to a whole new level, especially with a head coach, Sharon Moore, getting suspended the first couple games. Just that whole environment will be interesting because the pressure around Bryce Underwood to perform at a high level right away, even if he is starting, is going to be big time. And tracking his adjustment period to college football will be big. Georgia is also interesting. I feel like this battle doesn't get as much credibility and eyeballs. But here's where I'm at with that. It's interesting to me because Gunnar Stockton, I think, has a long ways to go to be a high-level passer. I feel like at his age, later on in his career, what we saw in film, it was a lot of, hey, his legs being a factor to open up the pass. It's not to say he can't be a good starter, but I have concerns of whether or not he can take the whole next step as a passer, which then he will not be an elite SEC quarterback if he can't do that. And will Georgia be able to win a national title without a upper tier quarterback? That to me is a big deal. The flip side, devil's advocate, oh, well, Max, if Gunner's, getting first team reps all off season, maybe he can level up to be a quality passer in the SEC. I just have doubts that he can get there because he's been on campus for so long. Georgia is very interesting to me, especially because when you put it into context, like right now, Gunnar Stockton is what? 8th best quarterback in the SEC, 7th best quarterback in the SEC. Not saying he's a bad quarterback, but I'm saying he's got a lot. Like that's tough to win the SEC if you're having the 7th best quarterback on your team, even if you're having all the dogs around them, pun intended. And then last, Colorado, saving the best for last. Deion Sanders, is he going to go with Julian Lewis, Caden Salter? I thought the Caden Salter transfer to Colorado surprised me. I was like, yo, what are we doing here? Because he could have gone, I think, a lot of different places and played for sure. Whoever's giving me tons of likes on TikTok, I appreciate you guys. But that's interesting. And then same way with Bryce Underwood. Julian Lewis going in there, 5-star, tons of street cred, tons of hype. It's gonna be really tough keeping a guy like that on the bench and not having him play, especially if Colorado starts losing games. The flip side, though, is if you rush a young quarterback to play earlier on than he should, especially when he's having to take over for Shedeur Sanders, and especially for when he's playing for a head coach like Deion, who's going to tell you how he sees it. And I don't think Deion's coaching style is advantageous to have a young quarterback like find his way. Like if you're losing games and the quarterback's playing like crap, is Deion really going to let his young quarterback have it in the media? I don't think so, but that's not the Deion we've ever seen. Deion's always called it like he's seen it, regardless of whether it's the quarterback, offensive line, whatever. So the Colorado QB battle is going to be interesting. And on that note, with like 2 minutes left, the two QB battles, the Giants will be fascinating. And the Browns, if I had to guess, I think Russ starts for the Giants. I think they trade Jameis Winston, which sounds obscure. That's kind of one of my spicier takes in the NFL season. I just don't think you can have the personality of Jameis and Russ in the same locker room when, oh, by the way, you just drafted a first-round pick and you're trying to develop him as well. That to me don't work. So an injury will happen for another NFL team where they'll be calling for a Jameis Winston. So in my opinion, that's how that'll shake out. And then what? Tommy DeVito will probably just get cut. You could put Jackson Dart on the practice squad, but I feel like he'll have an active roster spot, at least maybe after the first month of the season. For Cleveland, if I had to guess, it'll be Joe Flacco starts. Unfortunately, my guy Kenny Pickett gets cut, but who knows? Kenny Pickett's been the preseason warrior the past or the preseason MVP the past few years. If he has a big year, do you go him? And if you're the Browns, you tell yourself, hey, maybe Kenny Pickett's the next Baker Mayfield or Sam Darnold in terms of resurrecting his career once he gets a few years under his belt in the NFL. Either way, whoever has the best first couple games between Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett, one of those guys can be the starter. Whoever has the better preseason between Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders will be the backup, in my opinion. They'll try to develop one of them on the practice squad, and if they get a good trade offer for a team that liked one of those guys during the draft process, they'll ship them out. I don't think you can have two rookies for too long. You could probably get away for it. You probably could get away with it for a half season, and you can get away with it for a full season if one of those guys ends up starting. And then the optics can be, we love both those guys. Dylan Gabriel is our starter, but we'll have Shedeur as the backup because both guys are playing well. That kind of deal. It reminds me of the Commanders back with RG3 and Kirk Cousins, where the optics worked because it was like, oh yeah, RG3 is our guy, but hey, Kirk Cousins, I mean, he's the next best quarterback available in the market that we could get, so we're going to keep him on our team. So that is my take on the dynamics of quarterback competitions, which is what we're going to be talking about a bunch in August. Questions, what do we got? YouTube's over there popping. Lord Jimbo, good to see you. Kellen, how we living? Let me get my window out of the way. Speedy Cheetah. Speedy Cheetah with the, hey, Max, I transferred from Pitt to Hawaii, and I'm in a QB battle with a 4-star freshman. Do you have any tips on how I can become a better QB and how I can make the NFL? Well, first off, worry about your quarterback competition before you're worried about the NFL. As a guy who's been through that, it's hard to make the NFL if you're not winning your quarterback competition and getting on the field. So I'll take the advice more towards how to win a quarterback competition and what I would have done differently. I got too wrapped up into not making mistakes. And I think, as a guy, when it's your first time in a quarterback competition, you can get so locked into like, hey, let me just play clean football and let me not make mistakes. But coaches are going to be able to tell when you're making mistakes, but still playing good quarterback, like still playing the quarterback position well. Like, for example, not all interceptions are created equal. If you throw an interception trying to press the ball downfield on a post route and the DB makes a good play, the coach is going to know that that's not necessarily bad quarterback play. And I think when I was in quarterback competitions, I was so worked up in like what the stats thought or what the stats said that I played with a shorter leash and it was self-imposed. And I didn't trust that, like, these coaches have seen many and many and many of quarterback competitions. This isn't their first rodeo. They're going to be able to decipher, the different levels of mistakes and who's actually operating and who's actually playing quarterback and not playing tentative. Because coaches know, here's how I'll button it up. Coaches know you can't win championships with tentative quarterback play, period. They might say they're looking for a game manager and all that. They're looking for a guy who can go out and make plays. So allow yourself the space to go out and make plays would be my advice there. What else we got? TikTok, what are we going on? What do we got going on? Pitt rebound after an embarrassing finish last year? I think so. I think Pitt's one of the sneaky teams in the ACC because, speaking of quarterbacks, Eli Holstein, I think he's one of the most underrated quarterbacks in college football. The optics of Pitt's season last year was like, they won 7 games and then lost 6 straight. So it's like, something must be terribly wrong. Well, what happened is Holstein got hurt. They got injuries all over the offensive line. Incredibly unlucky. I pray for Pitt's sake that doesn't happen again. But they were not as far off as the record might suggest. So I think the optics for Pitt are real high. Drew Stanford, good to see you again, man. Will Darnold fall after leaving the KOC system, and does that leave the door open for Jalen Milroe? I don't think he does. I think his stats will fall, and so the average fan will be like, maybe Darnold's taking a step back, but the identity for the Seahawks is going to be a lot different than the Vikings. It'll not be as high flying. You're playing for a defensive-minded head coach. You got a running back that you love in Seattle. I think the offense will be much more game managery. And the big thing for Darnold will be, hey, can he play efficient football and protect the football and not get going down the path of when he has struggled, it's been when there's goofy turnovers. So the style will be different. I think the stats could potentially, take a step back. But I think there's a lot more ceiling for Sam Darnold to tap into. I don't think we've necessarily seen his best football yet. Don't forget, he's a top 5 pick. He was once in the conversation for a full offseason about, he's going to be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. The mentality for a quarterback shifts when you are the guy and you're not having to prove that you belong and you're not having to feel like you're playing with any sort of short leash, or you're not having to come in after a Kirk Cousins when half the fan base is like, maybe we should have, extended Kirk Cousins. That's not the situation in Seattle. Yes, he has to earn his stripes again, but he's proven to the football world he is an NFL starter. That can lead to confidence. That can lead to tapping into another notch of ceiling for Sammy D. Andrew, I do not know that safety. I do not. What else we got? Any tips for me going into a quarterback battle in high school? I need help. You should go with the jersey number 4. That's for sure. I mean, Avery Gaming, it's the cliches. Take what the defense gives you. Know that you're going to make mistakes. No quarterback competition is won over 1 day of practice. If you have 1 day of practice where you're making mistakes, don't beat yourself up. Respond over the next day. Make sure operationally you're dialed. That's the stuff you can control. You can control how you're getting in and out of the huddle. You can control whether or not you know the snap count, whether or not you know the plays, what's your preparation. If you're a leader and a vocal guy, be that. If you're not, don't, because coaches and players will see right through that. And don't be afraid to take the check down. If it's there, find completions, man. Find completions. One of the best quarterback advice I ever got was completions. Find completions, because completions lead to first downs. First downs lead to touchdowns. Touchdowns lead to wins. Find completions, whatever you can. Should I stay late after practice with receivers? Do you want to stay late after practice with receivers? I would, but if that's not you, don't be someone you're not. If you're a guy who, hey, let me do my work in practice and then that's my thing, then be that guy. Andy, insane For You page pull. There we go. Love it. There we go. TikTok, what do we got? How will Damon Williams play this year for UW? I'm super high on him. Tanner, good question. UW fans, this is how you know there is a lot of upside. When the local fan base is super excited on a guy, like Husky fans are with Damon Williams, but the average college football fan does not know the name of that guy, it's a good spot to be in. If you're not only if you're a gambler, but if you're maybe looking for some early Heisman odds, or for kind of who's the next up kind of guy. What's it like being the ultimate Brown? Except even though you spelt it wrong. I'll take that. Appreciate it. Well, Kevin Jennings win the Heisman. Haven't talked a lot about Kevin Jennings. I called his first game when he was officially named the starter versus SMU last year, versus TCU last year. He's good, man. He's a stud. I believe this will be his third year on campus. That's always when the big jump happens for college quarterbacks, second to third year, let alone when you become the solidified starter. The upside for Kevin Jennings, I think he's one of those guys that right now he's a top 20 quarterback in college football, but he's got the upside to be a top 5 quarterback in college football for sure. For sure. Johan, good to see you over there on YouTube. Oh, interesting. Don't remind me of leadership, Lord Jimbo says. While it's good, I had to sit through like 6 years of JT Barrett at Ohio State because he had better leadership than Joe Burrow and Dwayne Haskins. That is very interesting. Because leadership, when teams that are good on paper don't live up to the billing, they have the talent. They had a great year the year before. They had a lot of guys coming back, and then they flopped that year. I would say 8 out of 10 times it's because of leadership. And I know that's not fun for fans to hear, but it's because of the culture of those guys. Are the leaders on your team not vocal or cliquey or think they're too cool for school or complacent, or, hey, if the team's coach-led rather than player-led, that's a recipe for a team losing. To me, that happened with USC after that first year. First year with Lincoln Riley. First year with Lincoln Riley, you had Travis Dye. You had Shane Lee. Had some great leaders. Guys with chips on their shoulder. Second year, don't think the leadership was as strong. My sense is it was very cliquey in that locker room, and that's how you had a team underperform. So JT Barrett got you to a national championship, won you a national championship. I'm assuming you're a Ohio State fan. So even though the upside of a Joe Burrow or a Dwayne Haskins was better, my gut says going with JT Barrett was the better call. Splendid Daddy, good to see you. You think you'd be a good NFL scout like the guy in Moneyball? I do think if my job was to just watch film all day, every day, didn't have to manage the content side of things, I think I'd be a good scout. I do. That's the beauty of playing for 5 different head coaches. That's the beauty of seeing bunch of different quarterbacks that had success at both college and the NFL level. I think I'd be a good scout for sure. I appreciate that, Giga Rob. What else? Oh, we got a new O-Dog. O-Dog. Thanks for coming. New username. How did you come to a decision to pick your school? I'm a 3-star quarterback, and I haven't committed yet. Class of 2026. How did you pick between your favorite team or the best for your career? That is a phenomenal, phenomenal question. I obviously was in a different situation. I say this humbly, I could have gone to any school in the country that I wanted to. And so, the perspective was different. When you're a 3-star quarterback, there's levels to it. You're the backup option for a lot of schools that are going after a 4 or 5-star guy. And so it doesn't feel good to be the second option. But those schools are better programs. And then if you believe in yourself to compete and want to be at that level, well, then you owe it to yourself to entertain those bigger schools. Call it the top 50 programs in the country, 40 programs in the country. The flip side is, do you want to go be a big fish in a little pond? As a 3-star quarterback, do you want to go to a Purdue rather than what's a good example here? What's appropriate? Purdue rather than, maybe being Michigan's fallback plan and sitting behind a Bryce Underwood for the years to come. And maybe you won't sit behind him because maybe you're better than him and you beat him out. But the realities are, when Bryce Underwood's a 5-star guy at a school like Michigan, they're going to give him every chance to have success. Here's where I would land at it. I was a guy that I just had it in my bones that I wanted to go to a blue blood program. I wanted to bet on myself. I wanted to compete in that arena, and I wanted to be there. If that's how you're wired, then I think you owe it to yourself to pursue those opportunities and bet on yourself and bet on your talent, because every year there's 3-star guys that outperform and, they make a top 40 school look like a genius of like, oh, they found O-Dog. That's your username. They found O-Dog, middle of nowhere. Like, good on them. They evaluated the way that they needed to. But if you're sitting there and saying, I'm assuming that you believe in your talents for sure. Let's just make sure that's a given. But if you're sitting there and it's clear as day that you're like Michigan's 3rd or 4th or 5th option, and it's clear as day that they're late to the party and they're just kind of giving you the lip service message of like, hey, we'll give you every chance to compete and we'll give you a roster spot and all that. But you're just you sense that you're just another guy in their plan. Well, then I would really think about considering a Purdue type of school. And maybe Purdue is actually not as big as it. Let's say your school is, a Fresno State or an Oregon State or a Washington State. I would really consider that second option, the Purdue, Fresno State, Oregon State, UNLV, and all that, because it sucks not playing and getting on the field in college. And it sucks being, a total afterthought kind of thing. And if you can play and do have success, you can transfer up to the next level. But I would always say, if you believe in yourself and you've always dreamed to go to Michigan, or you've always dreamed to go, let's say it's not even Michigan, it's Minnesota, and you're a hometown Minnesota guy, and you've always had that dream, go for it. Figure it out. And you can always, it's shitty to say, but it's the reality of the situation. You can always transfer back and find a new home after that, but don't burn any bridges. And that's where I go out with that question. Question of the day right now goes to O-Dog. O-Dog. In this season, I want to create some sort of game of like question of the day. You DM me on TikTok or Instagram and I give you away something free because that's fun. But O-Dog, that's where I'd go with that one. What else we got? You called games for Wake Forest. Thoughts on their slow mesh RPO and if other teams shouldn't have copied it? I think it's super creative. For those that don't know, so every team in college football runs RPOs in some way. That's when you're meshing quarterback to running back to then see what the linebacker does, and then ultimately, that's hilarious. Nico Fala, my old roommate, is calling me right now, but I got to lie for the next 10 minutes. USC fans, name from the past. Nico, if you're watching this, what's up? I'll call you back later. But every team slow meshes, or every team meshes, reading what the linebackers or safety does, and then that can be the key indicator of whether or not you hand the ball off or throw it in the pass game concept. Wake Forest will not have their offensive line go downfield, and instead of that mesh being a second and a half, it's literally 3 seconds. I like it. I think it's really, really hard to coach in the transfer portal era. So for me, it worked when Wake Forest had a lot of juniors and seniors on their team, so they could ingrain that in their offensive line and ingrain that in their quarterback and running back. But when you're getting a lot of transfers, I think it's hard. You're spending a lot of practice time on that concept, which the benefit of what that concept is, I don't think is worth the amount of practice time it takes to get it done. I forget where that offensive staff landed. Whoever asked that question, where are they now? Because obviously it's a new staff at Wake Forest. But that would be my answer. I would be very hesitant of installing that because it takes a lot of coordination and it's a recipe for offensive linemen being downfield. And the worst thing you can do, I can relate to this at Pitt. When I was at Pitt, we had a very unique run game scheme where we were tagging jet sweeps onto like every under center run call. When that works, it's amazing. It takes a ton of practice time to instill that. And then that has to be part of your run game identity. And our problem was we had a play caller that was not totally familiar with him. It wasn't second nature for him. He had to work to, because he inherited that system. He had to work to like make that part of his identity, and it just wasn't seamless, and it didn't work for our offense that year. And in hindsight, we probably would have been better served spending that practice time on something that was more second nature for that play caller rather than getting lost in the weeds on, a very specific component to offensive philosophy. It's a good question. Love that. Love that. The OC at Wake Forest is now the offensive assistant at Iowa. Interesting. Iowa trying to go slow mesh. But like that is interesting to me because Iowa is a program that retains a lot of their talent, a lot of homegrown guys. With that scheme, with that slow mesh, you can teach it to them as a freshman, sophomore, and then ultimately they can become, brilliant at it junior, senior year. So that could make some sense. How would I fix the transfer portal and NIL? Ooh, baby. I'd fix the transfer portal by you have a one-time, no penalty transfer. And then after the first time, you have to sit out a year. I know that gets into an NCAA legal component that the NCAA doesn't want to fight because that opens up a whole, legal side if you can't put that constraint on players. But that would be my answer. I ultimately think for college football to get out of this mess that they're in, they have to have some outside entity come in that's not the NCAA and build a new college football type of league. I think the solutions that have happened or the quote solutions are just Band-Aids and they're not real solutions to create real change. I think it's going to have to come from the outside for it to be real change. And then that would alleviate the legality concern there. And then I think you need contracts that are public, contracts that are firm, contracts that are public. Everyone knows what every person's getting. You have language that's industry standard language across all NIL collectives. You're public on the contract, so then players' tax returns are public as well. And then you can hold these schools more accountable to how much they're actually getting paid. So, right now we're calling it the Wild Wild West. Well, it's the Wild Wild West because you're having players that, we're not really sure how much money they're getting. They're not really sure what they're doing to earn that money. Well, if their tax return and their contracts were more public information, I think you'd be able to police that better and, get the guardrails in place for college football. Like right now, the commissioners of the conferences are saying that rules are back into place and that the new revenue sharing agreement is all like great and all that. It's not, because yes, players will take part in revenue sharing, which means they'll get paid directly from the athletic department's budget, but they'll still go off and get their backdoor money from the collective. And we don't really know exactly what that is. We don't really know exactly how much each person's getting paid. And so there's like fake guardrails, but it's not really the actual case. So I think you need an outside entity to come in. You need contracts public and standard. You need an actual salary cap, not just a revenue share salary cap that then Oregon and Ohio State are just going to break with their collectives. There's a lot of work to do, but I think an outside entity or person needs to come in to make that happen. That's why to me, it's always the Mark Cuban example. If Mark Cuban approached the top 40 teams in college football and said, hey, you guys are all sick and tired of this mess. Big Ten, SEC, you're sick and tired of this mess. Let me start my own league. You guys join. We'll bring in the top 80 teams. You'll have to figure out some sort of conference structure, but then you'll get contracts that are consistent, language that is consistent. And the only way that happens, the only way you get the Big Ten or the SEC on board is if a Nico Iamaleava type of situation where he leaves Tennessee happens in season, happens right before the college football playoff, where then, hey, Tennessee, this is their dream season for the Vols and for the SEC. But then Nico's like, nah, you guys stiffed me out of $2 million, just as an example. I'm out of here. That is bad business for the SEC that will actually put their feet to the fire to make change. By Nico doing that in May, the SEC is able to kind of just brush it under the rug and be like, oh, it's a Nico Tennessee problem. If that happens right before the college football playoff, that becomes an SEC problem. What do we got here? City Stories with Drew. Don't recognize you. Welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How much validity do you put in recruit rankings for high school players, especially 3 stars? I put a lot of validity into rankings, 100%. It's so easy for people to say stars don't matter. That's a load of crap, because when you look at who's winning national titles and you look at who's getting drafted to the NFL, the stars do matter. They do. The data is very black and white. Obviously, you can find great players that are 3 stars. Obviously, there's exceptions to it. Obviously, guys mature at different levels. But you ask any coach in America, would they rather have a team of 4 and 5 stars versus 3 stars? Every single coach in America is taking the 4 or 5 star guy. Where that gets, and when I say that, that sounds obvious, but then you'll hear people on the side be like, stars don't matter. That's a load of crap. Where it gets more in the nuances is, I think coaches make their money and general managers make their money in evaluating the 4-star that maybe is already a little bit more developed and had a better high school career and played on a better high school program. So he got more prominence and more clout versus the 3-star who's maybe from a smaller town, maybe recently took football seriously, maybe developed later. Those decisions of, do you take the guy with a lower floor, higher ceiling, or lower ceiling, higher floor? That's where head coaches and general managers make their money. And that opens up a whole new catalyst of, like, if you're at USC, the USC fan message boards, they care a lot about star rankings and recruiting rankings and all that. And if you are locking in high recruiting classes, that can help you keep your job if you're at a blue blood program, versus if you're the coach that is taking chances on 3-star guys that you like, but the support there from a recruiting database isn't there. Well, then if you don't win, well, then you also look like a dumbass if you're choosing 3-star guys, because you're not recruiting well. So it's a double-edged sword there, especially for the blue blood programs. All you have to do is look at the percentage of 5 stars getting drafted compared to percentage of 3 stars. Yeah, for sure. Would you ever coach your old high school in Washington? No. Coach Plewer's got it taken care of. Nah. Hey, do you ever keep in touch with the USC guys that came out as dogs on leashes against Bama? I don't, to be honest. That was like Quentin Powell. That was Noah. I'm blanking on his last name. I think like Chris Hawkins was there. Who else was there? That was one of those things, I feel bad, where it looks so ridiculous when you get beat out or or blown out. But it's one of those things where, like, 2 guys start it, and then so naturally the next dozen guys feel obligated to, like, chime in and, like, be a part of it. But it's a result of just 2 guys being out of pocket and just ridiculous. But it's not a whole testament to the entire team or the entire coaching fan base, which is unfortunate. That is started by 2 guys, and that would not have started. So another thing, none of those guys were captains. The captains were already out on the field. I don't think that happens if the captains are sitting front and center. It doesn't, because the captains of that team were not wired that way. Would you ever dive into gambling futures, sports betting content? NCAA futures would be elite. Yeah, that's my intent with these lives. So the second live during the season, when we get later on in the week, I'm hoping to give betting advice. Last year, I was 64% against the spread. For those that know, you can make some real cash versus that. I was like 121 in like 86 or whatever it was. That was a great year. I hope we can continue that. But we were dialed last year, knock on wood. So I'm hoping to keep a running tracker on my whiteboard and keep that mojo going. I play in like a pick'em thing with my friends, and we're dialed. I won't give you my take on the game that I'm calling, but hopefully we can. If we're above 50%, we're making money. That was college football gambling. Pros, I'm not as dialed from the gambling perspective. Jay Saw, 322. I like your insight on the quarterback competition earlier. Are you aware of the situation at Bama? High level, but not nuances. What you got for me? Favorite game I've called. There's two that jump out right away. And now that I'm thinking about it, there's like a 3 and a 4th. One of my favorite games is literally the first game that I ever called. In 2020, Louisiana Tech versus UAB. It went to double overtime. We had one of the calls that I had like made it onto SportsCenter that night. I got Raising Cane's chicken tenders after the fact, feeling all juiced up, like the nerves of all the unknowns that come with calling your first game and the anxiety there. To be proud of the game that I called and then have a phenomenal college football game to call, that was awesome. And then I also called one of the biggest college football upsets in recent memory. I called Montana beating a ranked UW team in 2022, I believe it was. That was Michael Penn. No, that was it was the year before Penix, but that was a crazy game. And for me, it's always fun calling games at the greatest setting in college football because that's home for me. It's where I grew up, so that's a fun one. And then also, I called a game with Snoop Dogg last year. That was sick. That was a good one. And then a game last year versus at Virginia Tech. That open was sick. I had my producer in my left ear. Enter Sandman. We did the open live in my right ear. That was electric. Splendid Daddy asked, what was Sark like? I'll always have a soft spot in my heart for Sark because he gave me my first offer. He offered me the weekend after my freshman year of high school. But I got Sark at his worst time. It was a nightmare for everyone. I mean, he was drunk at practice and games. It's tough. I'm glad he got his life back on track. I think he was always a great play caller. I always admired how he totally reinvented his entire offensive philosophy. He was a Norm Chow, pro-style, USC, student body left guy. He got to Washington with Keith Price and realized, I don't got the dudes up front that I had at USC. And, oh, by the way, Baylor and Oklahoma, they're getting a lot of free first downs over in the Big 12. Maybe I should start with that. And Keith Price, that second year that he was a starter, completely different offense, no huddle, using boards. And Sark, whether it's in business or in football, I always admire thought leaders that view themselves as a thought leader, but aren't afraid to like out innovate themselves. Even if they run the risk of taking a step back. Sark's the same way, Kiff's the same way. They deserve a lot of credit, but yeah, I mean, the Sark situation was a mess for everyone involved at USC. White strips below on footballs and college footballs are better than the Duke in the NFL. I don't know if this is common knowledge or not, but I think the reason the NFL does it with no stripes is so it looks cleaner when the football's thrown and it makes quarterbacks look better. Like when Peyton Manning's throwing ducks, you can't really tell it's a duck when there's no white stripes versus when there's white stripes in college. Oh, you can tell there's a out innovate themselves. Sorry, there's a duck. Out innovate themselves. You like that? Hell yeah. I'll use that. Yeah, Splendid Daddy, which is a phenomenal username. I know I say that every week to you, but I was there for Kiffin, then Orgeron, then Sark, then Helton, then I transferred and went to Pitt for Narduzzi. City Stories with Drew, and this will be my last one, and then I got to go. It's almost at an hour. Do I like college football or NFL more? I love covering college football more. It's funny because since I didn't play in the NFL, college football is more just like a natural landing spot for me. So I always lean college football more. But as a content creator, and that being a huge part of my livelihood and business and interest, one sec, TikTok's making sure I'm not a robot. I have to answer a little question. The NFL fan is a better content fan than the college football fan. To me, it is very black and white, and it's unfortunate for us college football folks. And the reason why is this is the example I always use. If you're from Seattle and you're a UW and Seahawks fan, you care about what's going on with the Panthers and Bryce Young, at least high level. You're intrigued with like, hey, Bryce Young's situation last year, and you might read an article or watch a video on Bryce Young. But if you're a UW fan in that same area of the country, you don't really care at all about what's going on with Cade Klubnik in South Carolina at Clemson. Even though Clemson's a big-time program, you don't really care. You care about your team, your fan base, and maybe your rivals. And I would even argue a lot of teams don't even care about their conference now because of what conference realignment has become. 5 years ago, if you're a USC fan, you might care about what's going on with Oregon State because they're in your conference and there's the geographical component to that. But the NFL fan is a better fan than the college football fan from a content and social media perspective, which then this is kind of a duality of an answer, but I lean NFL more on my content because it'll perform better. So it's like, the give and take there. But that was fun, man. YouTube, good numbers. Appreciate you guys hanging. I'll be back. I will not be back on Thursday. Flying to the Northwest, baby. Can't beat the Pacific Northwest in July. I'll be flying on Thursday. So I'll see you guys on Tuesday. Everyone check out my long form YouTube video. It popped on last week's video. One question for every single quarterback in the NFL, not just the generic questions of like, is he him and all that. I made it in a dynamic way. It's that next level questions. Go check it out. Max Brown, one question for every quarterback in the NFL. Even if you can't watch it right now, add it to your save to later playlist for YouTube. And this week, what's YouTube's video this week? It is, he should have been a Hall of Famer. And it's on RG3, the alternate universes. I give you 4 scenarios where RG3 is a Hall of Famer. Go check it out. A little bit of a what if type video. It's good. Hopefully by now, if you're sticking around for this YouTube live, you know that, hey, my YouTube videos, there's some thought and production and scripting out that we're putting ahead of time just to not waste your guys' time. But I appreciate you hanging out, and I'll see you next Tuesday. Peace.